with Hepatitis B, Cultural Barriers, Stigma, and Institutional Discrimination. My name is Kate Morars, and I am the Senior Program Director at the Hepatitis B Foundation and Director of Pepi United. The Hepatitis B Foundation is a co-lead of Pepi United with the Association of Asian Pacific Community Health Organizations, or AAPCHO, and we're proud to present today's webinar with our partners, the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. So just a little bit about Pepi United. We're a national coalition to address the public health challenge of hepatitis B, which is the leading cause of liver cancer and a major health disparity among Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Our goal is to support and leverage the success of local community coalitions across the U.S. to increase hepatitis B awareness, screening, vaccination, and linkage to care. Today, we will be discussing Hep B-related stigma and discrimination, including cultural issues unique to AAPI communities, cases of Hep B-related discrimination, and the protection of the rights of individuals living with Hep B under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know how to join our webinar. Please note that you are in listen-only mode and will be muted during the presentations. You may submit questions in the question box or chat box in your control panel, and we'll be reviewing them as they come in, and we'll have a Q&A period after the presentations. And I wanted to go ahead and introduce our presenters. Our first speaker will be Diane Narasaki. Diane is a commissioner on the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. She's also the executive director of the Asian Counseling and Referral Service in Seattle, Washington. She's served as the ED of ACRS since 1995. Ms. Narasaki also co-founded and currently chairs the King County Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, a network of community organizations serving API immigrants and refugees in Washington State. Our second speaker will be Joan Block. Joan has been an advocate of the hepatitis B community and patients for over 20 years. She is the executive director and co-founder of the Hepatitis B Foundation and co-chairs Pepi United. Our third speaker will be Susana Lorenzo-Giguere. She is a trial attorney in the Disability Rights Section, Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice. Susana has been a career attorney with the Department of Justice since 1991. She works on numerous disability rights issues, including the Disability Rights Section's Hepatitis B enforcement matters. And finally, Ms. Nadine Shiroma, who is a community civil rights advocate from Seattle, Washington. Nadine is a community advocate from Washington who's worked to enhance civic engagement in minority and immigrant communities and implements structural solutions to addressing voting and civil rights issues. Since 2010, Nadine has assisted and advocated for students and individuals coping with institutional HBV discrimination. Great, and welcome to everyone and our panelists, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'll turn it over to Joan. Oh, sorry, I'll turn it over to Diane for welcoming remarks.
Thank you, and good afternoon. On behalf of the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and the White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for the webinar today. As was just mentioned, I'm a commissioner from Washington State, and today's discussion is one in which we in Washington State have been very engaged in recent years. Residents of our state have encountered institutional discrimination in medical and dental school and military service due to their HBV status. And a resident of our state that we'll hear from shortly, Nadine Shiroma, has been at the forefront of galvanizing advocacy to address such discrimination at the local and national levels with representatives of the organization speaking on today's webinar. Unsurprisingly, the Washington State residents I just mentioned were members of the Asian American Pacific Islander community. I say unsurprisingly because 70% of the AAPI population were either born in or had parents born in countries where HBV is prevalent. And as most people know, 50% of the 2 million people in our community with HBV are members of our community. While addressing cultural barriers, stigma, and institutional discrimination related to HBV is important on its face, the hugely disproportionate impact on the AAPI community makes it an issue of even greater concern to the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and the White House Initiative. The White House Initiative, along with Department of Health and Human Services and other government agencies, along with many community organizations, work together to contribute to develop the Hepatitis B Plan of Action in recent years. We're honored to join you today in this conversation to discuss related next steps, which includes addressing the issues which will be discussed in the webinar. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the experts who have joined us as speakers today, Joan, Susanna, and Nadine. Thank you.
Thanks. So
I
hope
Diane,
you can hear me.
and thank you for your partnership. Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, Kate, was I supposed to wait for you?
Oh, no, feel free. Go ahead, Joan.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide. So, as you know, I'm Joan Block, Executive Director, Co-founder of the Hepatitis B Foundation. The Hepatitis B Foundation is the oldest nonprofit organization solely dedicated to finding a cure and improving the lives of those affected by hepatitis B. Next slide. We were started in 1990 in response to a young family, and it really exemplifies a lot of the stigma and discrimination that we're going to be talking about today. When it was started, in the 1990s, for those of you who are too young, hepatitis B at that time was considered a highly was treated like it was HIV. Anytime you had a hepatitis B patient, you had to be fully gowned, masked, and gloved, and they were put in isolation rooms. I think Dr. Gish is on this call, and he can confirm that kind of treatment. So this family was affected by hepatitis B. We started the foundation because of them. And in addition, the affected baby this was the first case of stigma discrimination that we dealt with. The baby was asked to leave daycare and was not able to return until the pediatrician could provide a 100% written guarantee that the baby wouldn't affect others. Well, as you all know, there can be no 100% guarantee on anything. The other thing that this family faced was the anxiety about sharing meals with the family, having the baby share toys. So it was a very traumatic time for the family, both in terms of a new medical diagnosis and really the stigma and the discrimination that they faced. Sadly, this story's been repeated. We've been hearing this story over and over for the past 25 years. Next. So I think a lot of you have heard about the possible stigma and discrimination. We've been hosting patient conferences. We have a helpline, telephone helpline, and email consults. And probably the number one thing that we hear from families and adults who are affected by hepatitis B is their fear of how to disclose their hepatitis B status. As you'll see, the adults, they often feel shame, fear, anxiety, distrust. They literally have lost their jobs. They've lost health insurance. They've lost friends, and they've lost loved ones. So hepatitis B is not just a medical condition. It's also it has serious implications in people's social well-being and psychological well-being. The adults with hepatitis B, there have been support groups, and our patient conferences have been very valuable. The very first one we held was in 2001, and it was everybody was crying. The people that were there, it was the first time that they had met other adults with hepatitis B. For some, it was the first time they had told anyone that they had hepatitis B. This is still, even 10 years later, it's still a very emotional thing for adults. There are many adults who don't tell their families. They're really afraid. This is particularly true in, Asian immigrant families where hepatitis B is highly stigmatized because it has a lot of history of being a disease of, in the U.S. it's a rock and roll disease. In Asia it's just kind of a dirty disease, and you must have done something really bad to have gotten it. Some of the saddest stories that we've heard over the past 25 years are from parents of children with hepatitis B. The cases that I put there up on the screen, there was one family whose child, they didn't discover for months that their child was sitting, that their desk had literally been pulled to the front of the room next to the teacher. And another child who was literally had to eat in the teacher's lounge with the teachers because people were so afraid of hepatitis B. More commonly, those were some of the uncommon cases, but very commonly, children have been excluded from extramural sports teams. Lots of parents, are anguished because their children aren't invited to sleepovers or parties or neighborhood gatherings. So these are very serious, emotionally distressing events. Next slide. So you might be asking, well, with the vaccine, hasn't this really changed everything? Well, in the beginning when we started, people were not routinely vaccinated, so it was an issue. But there's the good and the bad of the vaccine. The good is that most adults under 25 have now been vaccinated against hepatitis B. So parents of children, most likely have peers who have been vaccinated, so there's a little less hysteria about their child potentially affecting someone else. But there's still, even with the vaccination, just last month on the hepatitis B adoption listserv, there was a newly diagnosed child, and the mother was, asking, should I tell my doctor? Should I tell my school? Should I tell my church? And the overwhelming response from the parents in 2015 is, don't tell anyone. You can't take it back. That there still is discrimination against their child who has hepatitis B. So the problem has not gone away. And you'll hear a little bit more from Nadine and Susanna in terms of how we can help to assist these parents, because there are now some legal ways we can help them. In the past, it was really just providing emotional support. So the vaccine has overall been a good thing because, most children are now being vaccinated. But the families that we helped 10, 15 years ago when they first adopted their kids or had a child with hepatitis B, they're now coming back to us because their children are entering college or they're entering medical and dental school. We have helped parents whose children, I can think of the one case of a young boy who had a baseball scholarship at a very good college, and the mother was terrified about telling them because she was afraid he'd lose the scholarship. More importantly, that he would be kicked off the team, and he lived for baseball. So we called the school, and it's very easy for me as a nurse and executive director of the foundation to find out what their policy is without saying that they have a student who's been enrolled. So we've been able to do that individually. I think Sherry Cohen's on the call. We, between Sherry and myself and others, Dr. Gish, others have been very helpful in trying. But those are like one case at a time. Those are the people that get to us. We worry quite a bit about the people we can't get to. So the other bad thing is, and we're going to get into this more, Nadine's going to talk more about this, but the overwhelming issue that has come up over the past several years are students who have applied to medical, dental, or nursing schools, or who have already been are already in these schools. When it's discovered they have hepatitis B, they are being asked to leave, or they're not being allowed entry. And the way the schools find out is, and the colleges, some of the colleges require proof of protective antibodies, but all of the medical, dental, nursing schools are increasingly asking for proof. So it's not good enough to just say you have the vaccine. You have to show proof. And then that's where these kids, who are often, from outside the U.S., discover that they have hepatitis B, and through no fault of their own, they are facing discrimination. Next. So I wanted to give you a timeline of the issue that I really want to bring up today. I mean, I could go into a lot of different stories in a lot of different ways, but in order to have what Nadine is going to talk about and Susanna talk about, it makes sense. I want to give you a timeline of what happened with the medical students that we had been helping. All of us have been helping, and I think of the Margaret Mead quote that it takes a small group of concerned citizens to make a huge impact. And this situation is really a case where a very small group of people work together to make a huge impact in 2 years. So I'll start with the end of the story. In March 2013, the Department of Justice, led by Susanna's efforts, had a successful settlement with the New Jersey Medical School, and hepatitis C is now a protected condition under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is enormous. That was not our goal when we started this, but that is the outcome, which is incredible. Our goal was in the early 2011, we received 4 different calls from students at different points in their medical and dental school application process. 2 students were already in medical school and asked to leave when it was discovered they had hepatitis B. The one case, he was just worked up for fatigue and found to have hepatitis B. And the second one, I honestly can't remember my memory, but anyhow, they were actually kicked out of medical school. The other 2 calls were from 2 students who had been accepted into a New Jersey medical school, had given up other options, and the one student had moved across the country, signed a 1-year lease to start school, and then they had both been vaccinated, but when they were asked to show proof of the antibody status, when they got their test results back, turned out they had chronic hepatitis B. Well, I know that none of you will be surprised, but all of these students were Asian students born to parents who, foreign-born parents. So this was a huge shock. Based on this, this was 4 calls within 6 months, and so the Hepatitis B Foundation, we went to the CDC, John Ward, and asked for his help, saying we need to get your HBV infected healthcare workers and students guidelines updated. They hadn't been updated since 1991. And the reason being is that these schools are using your guidelines to deny admission or to kick out these students. So to Dr. Ward's credit, he mobilized his division to work on those, and a year later they were published. But in the meantime, Nadine Sharoma, and you'll hear from her, I got her involved with some of the students, and she contacted the Department of Justice. And Susanna, bless her heart, took it on. And between all 3 of us, between the CDC updating their guidelines, the foundation providing, lots of medical support, information support, and the student contact, we really all worked on this, and ending on that happy note. Next. And so I think that's where I want to end, because my time is up. But as you can tell, this is something that is, very distressing to me personally and professionally. It's something that I'm very passionate about trying to address. It is wonderful to have medical guidelines, have the CDC updating their guidelines, and now to have the Department of Justice really weighing in and creating mechanisms for us to address discrimination. This is a very exciting time for us to be able to help people and not just hold their hand, but we really have ways to make a difference and help move this along. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joan. And now we will turn it over to Susanna Lorenzo-Gare to go into more detail about the Department of Justice's role.
Hi, thank you all for coming today, and really appreciate hearing from Diane and Joan. I guess what I'd like to do is show my screen. I'd like to back up just a little bit even further. A lot of these connections start in the unlikeliest places. In 2010, I first heard from Nadine because we had some similar contacts in the Asian advocacy community through minority language voting rights. And through those contacts, we were able to connect on a different dental student in a California university who had been experiencing discrimination and who was involved in his own private litigation. And that was sort of the beginning of the story. We, at that time at Justice, didn't have really an avenue to go to legally to address this, because under Supreme Court case law, we had to look at the most recent, the most up-to-date scientific knowledge from a public health source. So although, as you all probably know, the SHEA guidance which was there before the CDC updated, was more advanced. It was a little more, it took into account more of the updated scientific knowledge than the 1991 CDC guidance. It wasn't considered a public health authority on this. We weren't able to use that to give us authority to act. So we really were kind of trying to figure out how the department could address the issues that Nadine had brought to our attention originally in 2010. And it was really through all of 2010 and 2011 when we started getting these other complaints that we started realizing that the CDC was going to be acting. As you all know, hepatitis B, you all already have all the background of where it came from. For us, this was a new thing, and we wanted to understand this as well. We were surprised at the confluence of a disability, what we consider to be a disability, with a national origin issue. For us, under the new Americans with Disabilities Act, Amendment Act, we can look not only at major life activities, which is what the original ADA looks at, but also the Amendments Act broadened the ADA to look at the operation of major bodily functions, including the immune system, normal cell growth, digestive, bowel, bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory, circulatory, endocrine, and reproductive functions. And that was in the most recent Amendments Act. And Congress also made clear that that list was illustrative, not exhaustive, of other major bodily functions. So we were able to kind of get at hepatitis B through that, which was the first time we were able to really look at it. Let me come back here. Titles 2 and Titles 3 of the ADA prohibit entities, and Title 2 is for public entities, and Title 3 is for public accommodation. So Title 2 would be schools, like the schools that we were talking about, University of New Jersey or any other type of state-run institution, and Title 3 would be for private institutions. They are not allowed to discriminate. That's where we got our legal authority to do anything. Now, what the schools could do is, ADA would require them to make a modification so that somebody who's in the school would not be discriminated against unless it would fundamentally alter the nature of the program. You can exclude somebody if they're posing a direct threat to the health or safety of others, and that idea of what is a direct threat is where we're talking about what's the current medical evidence, and that is why we needed to have really current medical evidence. The 1991 CDC guidance was kind of still thinking about how there had been transmissions in '87, and there was still a lot of concern about transmission. So it really wasn't giving us a lot of leverage to say that there wasn't going to be a direct threat if you had somebody who had hepatitis B in the medical schools. So we needed something beyond that. Based on the updated guidance, which we were really grateful to have been allowed to be part of that updating process with many of the drafts coming to us, we were able to learn, and it was very strong point that they showed us through their research, that there hadn't been a single reported transmission of hepatitis B from a student to a patient in the last 21 years. So it's very hard to show that a student with hepatitis B would be a direct threat. And I just want to emphasize that we do believe this is a very important area, and we want to make sure that for any of you listening, and also for Joan and any of the other Nadine, please bring these matters to our attention so that we can try together to address them and the discrimination. You already have read the CDC update, but I just want to go through for those of you that may not have done this. The thing that was so amazing about the recommendations is that it was very specific in answering that hepatitis B, this is a direct quote right here, should not preclude the study or practice of medicine, surgery, dentistry, or the allied health professions. That's sort of not typical. Medical and dental students with chronic hepatitis B virus infections who do not perform exposure-prone invasive procedures, but who practice non or minimally invasive procedures should not be subject to any restrictions on their activities or study. So this guidance was for the management of people who have hepatitis B. Oops. And but even if you have hepatitis B, if you're not performing exposure-prone invasive procedures, you shouldn't be subject to any of the guidelines that they suggest for your management, which I thought was also a very helpful distinction that they made. They also went on to say that usually medical students and dental students aren't performing these exposure-prone invasive procedures, so that too, that's really the only place where they saw that there was any possibility of transmission. They gave some good parameters for what the management should be like, and it's really very individualized. So an expert review panel should be convened, and it really has a lot of different people involved. And really one of the important aspects here is respecting the confidentiality of the providers or the students' Hep B status. And the other thing I liked here too is that, you know, even if you have hepatitis B, you still can conduct exposure-prone invasive procedure if you have low or undetectable hepatitis B viral loads. And then they also were very clear on what the regular testing should be. It's every 6 months. It's not weekly. It's not, you know, every 2 months. They're very helpful on what would be a reasonable type of testing. It also gave what they considered to be a very, very conservative viral load level, because they really hadn't seen anything at this load level that could have transmitted. And they also were good about calling attention to spontaneous fluctuations or blips in the viral load level. So if somebody's been tested and it's like higher than 1,000 IUs, that they would consider that to be, you know, it could be considered a blip, and it should be looked at in that way instead of just as an automatic reason for excluding somebody. So I really liked how they were so thorough in looking at the realities facing practitioners and students who have hepatitis B. The other thing that was very helpful is their definitions of exposure-prone invasive procedures, and it really is limited to these kinds of procedures. It's not like, you know, somebody just drawing blood. It's not, you know, some basic things where, oh, we're gonna, you know, this first-year medical student who's taking my temperature is going to give me hepatitis B. That's not an exposure-prone invasive procedure, and they really cautioned against defining exposure-prone invasive procedures too broadly. So I thought all of that was really helpful. That brings us to the settlement agreement that we were able to reach. And some of the issues that CDC raised in its very helpful guidance were brought up by the school. What happened here was 2 students had applied. One of them got into both the medical school and the school for osteopathic medicine. The other one got into the medical school. And they were accepted, and then they had to send in their health forms, as Joe mentioned, and then their acceptances were rescinded. And that's when Nadine got us involved in this. And we were able to find a little bit more about this. The school just thought this is awful. They're going to pose a direct threat to the health or safety of others, and that will justify excluding them. It's one of the exceptions under the ADA, and we were supposed to acknowledge that. Well, they said their viral loads were so high, and they could infect all sorts of other people while they were performing all these procedures that they were going to be required to perform. And these procedures were essential to their curricula. And if they didn't do those procedures, it would change the essential functions of being a medical student at their school. So they had all of the defenses that would allow them to exclude somebody legally under the ADA, even though they have a disability. Let's see. We found out in our investigations that they weren't required to perform exposure-prone invasive procedures to graduate, just like the CDC said. And the students got treatment, and their viral loads were lowered so much that once they were, first they were not under the CDC, they weren't subject to any management because they weren't performing those procedures. And even if they were going to perform the procedures, their viral loads were below the 1,000 IUs that were what the CDC said were the highest levels you could have if you were going to perform those procedures. So then we were able to show with that information, using what CDC had and using the information we were able to get, that they didn't pose a direct threat. And because of that, we were able to get a settlement. This university had to adopt a hepatitis B non-discrimination policy. They had to train everybody on this, and they have to keep on reporting to us that they're continuing to train them every September. They had to admit them back again, and they had to provide $75,000 in compensation and tuition credits to the two applicants. So we thought it was our very first hepatitis B case, and we thought it was very helpful. We also, at the same time, were working sort of what we consider to be on a technical assistance piece. It's a Dear Colleague letter, and we joined with Education and Health and Human Services to send a joint letter to all of the health-related schools in the country. And in this letter, we wanted them we wanted all the schools to conform their practices to this new CDC guidance. We were trying to say what our authority was here is, these are the different laws that we apply, that we are authorized to enforce. We kind of gently said that some health schools might be making enrollment decisions based on an incorrect understanding of hepatitis B resulting in discrimination. And we gave them some basic information about the CDC guidance and their obligation to comply with the federal laws prohibiting discrimination on the basis of disability, race, color, and national origin, because we were able to tie this also to the fact that many of the people who have hepatitis B are Asian. We were able to, at the same time, cite to our settlement agreement. This is what happens in certain situations where we have facts that show there's discrimination under the ADA. So it was as sort of a motivator to schools to comply. And let's see, the different agencies made really strong statements that I thought were very helpful. We urge, sorry about that window keeping on popping up, health-related schools to review their recommendations and ensure that their policies and practices comply with federal non-discrimination laws. Applicants and students with hepatitis B should not have to face exclusion on the basis of unfounded fears and stereotypes, and the Justice Department will not tolerate it. And then Ed made a good statement also, public health and civil rights will be promoted when medical schools rely on the most scientific information, not overbroad generalizations in dealing with medical students. And every time we talk about the most recent scientific information, we're really talking about CDC's new guidance, and it was just the perfect thing to happen, and amazingly that they were able to update it so quickly and so well. HHS, where CDC is based out of, also said that the CDC recommendation promote public health and safety while offering guidance on the management of students with hepatitis B. Our agencies place considerable weight on this guidance and our enforcement of federal civil rights laws, and that is true. We all do, based on the laws that we enforce. If anybody has any questions about the ADA or hepatitis B, please contact us. Just go to our website, ada.gov. You could go on ada.gov and type in hepatitis B, and the letter that we sent out, the joint letter, as well as our settlement agreements, and are all in there. And if you have any specific questions that you would just like to ask me, you're trying to figure out if this makes sense, you can also contact me directly, and here's my contact information. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Susanna, for that great presentation. I wanted to just emphasize, as Susanna mentioned, that we encourage anyone that has heard of any stories about discrimination to encourage them to contact their advocates or us, and so that we can engage Susanna in helping with those types of complaints. I'm now going to turn it over to Nadine Sharoma, who has been a great advocate on behalf of the medical students who continues to be engaged in civil rights issues and helping those with hepatitis B.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you all for participating. I am not nearly as gifted or as used to presenting as Susanna and Joan, and I'm an advocate, a community advocate, who saw something that was that didn't feel right. And the more I dug into it, with the little that I could dig into it, because there was so little published information on the internet at the time, and no one spoke of it, I just felt in my bones that something was wrong. The laws did not, the policies of the schools were not reflected in licensing laws of the states in which the schools are located. And the family I was assisting was like many Asian families, you know, just feeling they had no way to fight a system that really, and they were getting, the advice they were getting was that this is too big and you can't change these organizations. So today I want to focus more on how we make those structural changes. Susanna and Joan have spoken to you about it, and it has taken that. We cannot keep putting Band-Aids on the stigma and discrimination issues. We've had to go to the core to find out where does this start. And even with the CDC update and with the DOJ settlement agreement, there is still work to be done. Now, unlike most of you who are participating, I knew virtually nothing about HBV before 2010. Before that, I heard a short presentation, and all I knew is that it was something that impacted our community more than the rest of the American US community. And I mentioned this because I want to tell you that it's possible to reach out to people who know nothing about medicine, know nothing about disease, but have a real concern about fairness. And when we can reach out to them and let them know that people's rights are being violated, or that they're being stigmatized unfairly, or in the case of those who need to be screened and get appropriate care, to let them know that their own or their children's opportunities, as well as their health, could be at risk if they aren't diagnosed and treated. Because I think there are many ways to reach people, and we need to speak of the disease not only in terms of the medical issues, but of also the potential inequities that exist in the world. Kate, can you go to the next slide? I won't go over all that was done. I wasn't sure what others were going to provide for today. So I just want to say that I provided this slide to show you that it didn't happen very quickly. It takes a long time sometimes, and there are days when, you know, I felt maybe I was wrong, maybe this was too big, or it was too serious, and I must have misunderstood something. So, and I'm saying this because we still have work to do, and I'm going to keep mentioning that because I really need assistance and support, and I want more people to be aware of it and to speak more openly about it. So essentially, this is what happened between 2010 and 2013, as Susanna and Joan have described. And we thought initially, wow, great, this is done. And we actually turned our focus to writing the schools ourselves as advocates and telling them they needed to take heed and follow this, thinking that was going to be, you know, those trying to identify the ways that we could be proactive in moving, making sure that the settlement agreement was heard and it was acted upon. We encouraged the ADEA to make their admissions officers aware of it, and with a partner, we were able to have someone from CDC actually address admissions officers, who, I have to tell you, in 2010 told the first student I worked with, oh no, this has happened before to other students. You're not the first. And this is our right to exclude you. And what does a student do? as a human being, no matter how bright you are, all the work, the hard work, and the intelligence that brought you to this point where you've accepted into professional school, they know nothing. There was almost nothing on the internet, nothing that would guide us. Can you go to the next slide, Kate? Oh, thanks. Okay. I think we missed something. Kate? Oh, we're missing something. Okay.
Sorry, Nadine. Is it this one?
No. Well, anyway, there's a example number 1 and 2. But I want to tell you what I should speak about, and I'm sorry, I didn't see this earlier, that there was a missing one. I don't expect everyone to read this. It's a lot, and it's not usually what we would do for a presentation. I realize that. Examples 1 and 2, these were examples of current policies that are published on the internet. And I have just brought forward another complaint, a new complaint to the Department of Justice, because I was very dismayed that, again, a law or a ruling or an agreement, a settlement agreement that sets that tells schools what to do is only so good as people know and actually implement it. What I was showing with the other 2 policy examples and these is how differently each school is writing the policies up, and how they are displaying it, or where they are telling, when and how they're telling students what their policies are. And when we post this for you after today, I think when you look at the other policies, you'll see how much shorter they are. Even between these 2 policies, if you weren't someone well-versed in hepatitis B, and remember, a lot of people don't even know they have hepatitis B, you would not know what they're talking about or how this really works. In fact, just between these 2 policies, one of them is straightforward and goes according to what the settlement agreement and the CDC has recommended. Another one goes beyond that and is actually using the SHE recommendations. So a student or an average person looking at this wouldn't know this. And if you look at the other examples that I'll provide, you'll see they didn't even provide anything that would resemble this. It still looks as if the person must prove immunity, and that they have actually received the vaccine and have the antigen. And we know that that is not possible at this point in time for someone who has chronic Hep B. So when a student is misled or is given information that draws other conclusions or doesn't tell them the information that would really help them to be proactive on their own behalf or for the people helping them, in essence, that is a form of discrimination. Could we go to the next slide? Now, I mentioned that we're also working, that is one of the new cases. We have not yet heard back from Susanna, from the DOJ, but we are hopeful that they will take this up and work on this. We are currently working to have the Department of Defense update and codify its policies. Now, we were very surprised to learn that the Department of Defense does not come under the jurisdiction of the DOJ, and that it does not have to follow the CDC guidelines. So we became aware of this because, number one, we had a 9-year veteran who had served in Afghanistan and Iraq, and who actually was diagnosed after his first tour of duty in Afghanistan, and yet allowed to continue, but just in 2013, when he was brought up before a medical review board, was found unfit and has been discharged from service. That just turned his world upside down. We have students who have looked into scholarships for healthcare students, military scholarships, which they would also earn by serving in the military for 4 years after their graduation. These students aren't eligible for scholarship, nor would they be eligible to serve as an attorney in the JAG division, because again, they have a pre-existing HBV condition. Now, on its face, one might say, well, these are just policies, the Army has its right. But when we dig further and we find that the Army has different policies for people for HIV, we can see that there is unequal treatment of an equally important and concernable disease. So the question is, why one and not the other? And why would you have very clearly defined information for HIV and hardly anything for HBV, and moreover, not even rely on current medical information? So we are trying to bring this to the attention of the Department of Defense, and as most of us know, the Department of Defense is an entity unto itself, but we are bringing voices and using many pressure points to get their attention and encourage them to see that it's in their best interest and in the interest of fairness to change their policies. And I would really appreciate any of you who might be, as we move forward, when we call on organizations for assistance, or if you want to be personally involved, I certainly would appreciate that. Just go ahead and email me at the address that's provided, because really this is a fight for rights. We've spoken about the cultural barriers that prevent people from speaking about HBV, and we have a community that has learned, that holds a lot in, that isn't always willing to air the laundry to everybody and is afraid of the stigma that might come with it. We have lack of knowledge. And then you combine all of that with institutional discrimination, information that's withheld, or information that is presented in a way that is very confusing or misleading. We are then just ignoring the 2 million people living with HBV and the stigma and discrimination that comes with it. So our fight is a fight for rights, and I would hope that others of you would join us within this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you for all of your support and your work. We will now open it up for questions. And just a reminder to folks online, if you do have a question, please feel free to submit them via the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. I do want to point out a couple of websites that are relevant to this webinar while we are waiting on questions here. Our partner, APCHO, has released a campaign called Just Be. This encourages people living with hepatitis B to come forward with their stories and share their personal stories as a way to really destigmatize the issue. And I encourage everyone to visit the campaign at justbecampaign.org, so JUSTB. And then the other website I want to encourage is our partnership with the CDC, www.cdc.gov/nohepatitisb, which has a great array of materials in language that also sort of speaks to living with hepatitis B and some myths about living with hepatitis B, such as sharing your food, that you can get it, which is a myth. So I encourage you to visit those websites as resources along with this webinar. So we do have a question from the audience. Our first question is, there were discussions, pros and cons, many years ago to have kids infected with HBV get the Hep B vaccine as required. This way they would not be identified as being infected until they wanted to disclose their status. Do you have an opinion on this? So I will turn that to Sherry Cohen. Joan Block had to drop off, but Sherry is the Director of Public Health from the Hepatitis B Foundation, and I believe she's online. Sherry, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure, unless one of the other panelists want to. So yeah, we have heard of that before, and we've dealt with that before at the Hepatitis B Foundation. It's a really good question, and you will hear different opinions from different people. Some folks are, potentially worried about giving a child who has hepatitis B the vaccine because they're not really sure how, if at all, that would affect their immune system. So the short answer is I've seen people do both, and the Hepatitis B Foundation doesn't necessarily recommend either suggestion, either giving, some people actually will go ahead and give their child the vaccine so that they can accurately document. Some people will just document that they have the vaccine without giving it to them. This is actually a really good question for PKIDS. It's an organization called Parents of Kids with Infectious Diseases, and I'm happy to post the question to the executive director there, and then we can post the answer, their response online when we post the recording for this seminar.
Great, thanks, Sherry. Another question that we received, well, first of all, Susanna, Nadine, I wanted you to have this opportunity to jump in as well if you do have any opinions.
I do, just that, Sherry, my only concern with this is that it gives the student or even the parents, especially the student, the false impression that sometimes that this is actually okay, that this means that they don't have to be, they won't encounter any other challenges in the future. So say that the student then applies to dental or medical school and then has to prove that they have developed antibodies, that they don't have chronic Hep B. I'm not sure that that's, I would like to weigh in when you discuss this with Joan, because I think there are long-term implications, and then there are people who then learn something or read something and think that that's the truth when it is not.
I'll just second what Nadine is saying. This is Susanna. It's true that students that we encountered through Nadine's advocacy had been vaccinated, but it didn't really matter because they had chronic hepatitis B, and the school really jumped on them. So I think Nadine is right. If they just should keep their eyes open as to, that's one thing. It's good to get the vaccine, but the schools are asking more than if you've just been vaccinated. If you're going into a health-related school, it's more than just whether you've been vaccinated.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. I was talking about school entry, elementary school. So the question, as I took it, was about young kids. Because you do. So I wasn't necessarily referring to college or post-college education.
Oh, I understand that. It's just, again, by doing that, we're not really educating even the schools to know that this student cannot be. First of all, that you're having them vaccinated for something that receiving the vaccine when it's not going to do any good. And then it creates a false sense of security. And really the emphasis should be on having everyone else who doesn't have chronic Hep B, ensuring that they are vaccinated. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'll forward the question to PKids, and it's definitely worth discussing more.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to the next question we have is, what can a practitioner, dentist, or medical doctor who finds out they have Hep B in other countries get help when they face discrimination? I guess, where can they get help when they face discrimination in other countries?
Are you saying they were diagnosed in another country?
I think this has to do with an international policy question, and I think it has to do with a practitioner living in another country who is facing discrimination and has Hep B. Where can they get help?
Susanna or Sherry, are you able to?
I am not. You know, I just base all of our work based on the United States laws and what we can do to enforce them. I don't know international bodies that address discrimination.
Yeah, I would. No worries. I think one resource that this person may be able to access, maybe as a start, I would suggest that they go to the World Hepatitis Alliance, which is an international group that may be able to, maybe a good start, because there's a list of members on the alliance that are working in different countries. So I would suggest that you check them out, and we can be sure to assist you afterwards with that information as well.
Actually, I think. Go ahead. Who's talking?
This is Kate.
Oh, well, I just wanted to add that one of the things that helped me when I was looking for information and not finding things about the U.S. is that I read that some European countries, Great Britain and all, have established viral loads that were acceptable. So I think a person could also look to see what other countries are doing and compare that, and that would be another way of at least opening the conversation.
Great, that's a great suggestion, Nadine. Thank you. Okay, we have a few more minutes, so I just wanted to move on to the next question. Has anyone developed a model school policy so they can know how to comply with the ruling? I don't know, Susanna, do you know if that has been done?
Well, we have a policy. There was a policy that was adopted at the University of New Jersey, UMDNJ, Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. So they've got a policy. I think Nadine is also aware of another school that has a policy that she's been really looking at all the policies nationwide. Wasn't there the one in California that she really liked?
Actually, one of the UMDNJ schools is shown as one of the examples in the slide, and another school's policy is also listed, and that is the one that actually is more liberal than the CDC guideline. It's among the best, but it's still not, in my sense, the things I look for, I don't think it's as comprehensive. It could still say a little bit more or provide students a contact. But I would say that those two were the best that I found.
Great. Thank you. And then our next question is, so hepatitis B core antibody indicates exposure. Once the patient is hepatitis B core antibody positive, they do not need a vaccine. How do we get this message across? Does anyone want to take that? Sherry?
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry. I'm just reading the question. Hepatitis B core indicates exposure once space. Oh, that's a really good question. So I think the core antibody positive is a really confusing test for a lot of people. I think even healthcare providers we've seen have called us and often are confused with what the core antibody positive means. I think that might be something we should talk about offline and maybe get some experts together to figure out what the best message and the least complicated message is. But it's definitely worth discussion, because I do think that that's something that needs to be made simpler, that message. So yeah, we will definitely follow up on that.
Great. Thanks, Sherry. And then I think we have time for one more. So our last question, and I think, Nadine, this is directed towards you. It is concerning that universities are implementing the policies so differently. How are you obtaining these policies, and is there a systematic way to obtain them from all the medical schools?
I'm sorry I had to laugh because I'm obtaining them by going to the internet. Yeah. And hello?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Am I not mute? Okay, I'm not muted, right? I was looking because I couldn't remember if I had unmuted myself. I've had to go through the internet, look up schools, search and search sometimes. Some of them are much easier to find, some are not. That's part of the problem. We would like to see all of this more uniformly presented and with their admissions information. I'm sorry to say there's no other easy way to get it. We have not. There are so many different programs, even within one school. Nursing school, for example, you have many different nursing programs, and each of them has their own write-up. So it is really difficult to have that kind of coordination. Some of it, I was hoping at one point that we might be able to go through the associations that serve as clearinghouses for the different medical schools, dental programs, nursing programs. And that is another option. But again, it's to be explored.
Great. Thank you for that question. And actually, we have one more really good question I do want to fit in. And this may go to Susanna or Nadine. Besides discrimination of students and trainees, it also exists for healthcare professionals post-training. We know of a case of a dentist who was denied a state license by the New Jersey State Board and so is practicing in New York instead. Have you heard of such cases? Any recommendations for how we can address these issues in post-trainees appreciated? She mentions not all hospitals are academics and they may not be aware of the DOJ settlement to training programs.
Right. Thanks. It's very helpful to learn about those situations. We haven't received any complaints like that, and it would be helpful if that information could come to us. It doesn't have to be formal. We can work together on developing what the facts are and how best what the next steps should be. But we would be very interested in learning about situations for practitioners as well as obviously for students. The CDC guidance was meant for managing both healthcare providers and students, and the original one before it was modified in '91 was simply for healthcare providers. So students were just tagged on. It really is something that affects, from what we understood, but we just hadn't heard any specific facts or any specific complainants. It really does affect providers as well. So if you could bring that information to our attention, that would be very helpful.
Sharon,
I'd like to add something to that. I would. This is Nadine. In addition, Susanna, I have, in speaking with people who are recently graduated, I've learned that many of the dental businesses, dental practices, are privately owned. They don't have more than X number of employees that would require them to not discriminate, etc. And so it's very touchy and difficult for the person applying to work for them to know how much they can disclose. Because if they disclose that they have HBV and that they're under treatment, their viral load is very low, they can still be, the owner of that practice can still discriminate. So that's something that concerns me, and haven't been sure where to turn for that. But it's still out there. And again, it's just yet another example of the reality of how the discrimination works and how it continues if we don't talk about it, and if and information is not widely known.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much for all of those questions. This just shows how much more work is to be done and the stories that need to be shared as we move forward in order to confront some of these issues. Again, we encourage everyone to share their stories, connect with us offline, and we will be sure to connect you with either Susanna, DJ, and others to help with your cases. So we've taken note of your questions and comments. If we were unable to get to your question today as we're running over time, we'll be sure to get back to you offline. If you have any further questions, this slide includes various ways you can connect with us. Please don't hesitate to contact us directly at connect@happyunited.org. You can also learn more about Happy United and our members who are located across the country at happyunited.org. Lastly, I wanted to thank you so much to our presenters, Diane, Joan, Susanna, Nadine, and Sherry, for taking those questions and your presentations. Thank you all for participating. For our audience, please be on the lookout for a quick survey to take your comments about our presentations, how we can continue to bring these webinars and improve your experience. We will also be following up to all of our registrants with a recording of the webinar today, so you can share with those that are unable to make it to our live presentations, including a copy of the presentation materials, which we will also post on happyunited.org. Thank you all again, and have a great rest of the day.